Have you ever met a rich person and asked him how they got rich? And they said, saving? No, never. This person does not exist. Everything you have learned about saving money and wealth creation, it's a lie. A dollar saved is not a dollar earned. Everything about what you are supposed to do with your money, that you should save your money in order to be able to take on debt, it's a lie. It's a trap that will keep you poor forever. Watch this video to learn what you need to do in order to create a wealthy life. The most important mind shift you need to make is to understand that it is not about money. Your dollars or euro will be worthless one day. It's about preserving and extending your buying power. So don't be satisfied with 3% of an interest in your savings account when inflation is actually 8%, because you are losing 5% of your buying power that year. In order to at least keep your buying power at the same level, you would need to generate as much return after tax as there is inflation of the currency you are calculating your buying power in. It's so important for you to understand that the $1,000 in your bank account will only be worth $900 in the next year when inflation is at 10%. This graph shows you the historical development of the buying power from the 1920s to nowadays. To make this even a little bit more obvious, in order to have the same buying power of 1 million in 1993, you would now need $2,070,000. This means if you save this million, it would have lost 50% of its value. With the current inflation levels, this development is even supercharged, which means just in 7 years your money will likely devalue half. Now, you might say, well, but my salary has also increased over the last years. Yes, it has, but rising cost of living has clearly outperformed your wage. From 22 to 2022, the average salary has increased only 27%. In the same time, the cost of buying a house has gone up a whopping 148%. It's not about working harder and saving more money. This does not get you anywhere except keeping you poor. But why is that? Why isn't it enough to have a well-earning job and save some money? Let's have a look at the reasons. Essentially, it boils down to one event in 1971. In that year, US President Nixon decided to end the gold standard. Prior to 1971, the dollar was real money backed by gold and silver, which is why the US dollar was known as a silver certificate. After 1971, the US dollar became a Federal Reserve note, which meant it ceased to be money and became a currency. This change was one of the most important changes in modern money history, but few people understand why. What are the consequences of this change? What's the difference between money and currency? Let's take a brief look at the history of modern money. After World War I, Germany's monetary system collapsed. Inflation got completely out of hand. In 1913, a pair of shoes cost 13 marks. By 1923, the same pair of shoes was 32 trillion marks. As a result, the savings of the middle class got wiped out, which eventually led to the beginning of World War II. In the closing days of this war, the Bretton Woods system was put in place to stabilize the world's currencies. This was a quasi-gold standard, which meant currency had fixed exchange rates and were backed by gold. This system worked fine for a while, until 1971, when President Nixon decided to stop the backing of the dollar by gold and silver. He did this as a result of the rising imports of goods from overseas and thus rising exports of dollars, meaning gold. It was an attempt to stop the loss of gold for the US, and thus he replaced gold with the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Never in the history of the world had one nation's currency been the world's money. To understand the scope of this, you need to understand what now was possible. The US dollar was and is a currency not convertible into precious metal or an asset of equivalent value. This means it is a currency that can be created as an act of will. In economic terms, it is often described as money created out of thin air. Basically, it means that more US dollars can be printed at an infinite number at any time. So, what's the way out? What can you do to build your wealth? Do not save your wealth in your local currency. Invest in assets. Historically, all major asset classes like oil, gold, real estate, or stocks have been outperforming the US dollar in the long term. By now, you should have learned why this is the case. As a consequence, investing your money in different asset classes is the only way to preserve your buying power in the long term. Your investments will generate profits by increasing their value in the long run. Ideally, this increase will allow you to outperform the higher cost of living and thus eventually not only preserve your buying power, but even extend it. The currency you are using in this context only serves as a gateway or enabler to compare and measure your buying power as well as a payment metric. It does not function as a store of value. When starting to invest your money, it is important to diversify your wealth from early on. You don't want to put all eggs in just one basket, meaning don't only invest in one stock because someone told you about its potential. Always spread your money. In terms of stocks, index funds can be a good option. Moreover, ETFs have become quite popular in the last couple of years. Here, you'll have the opportunity to invest in different asset classes. Moreover, you can invest in commodities like oil or gold directly, maybe buy and rent out an apartment or a house. You'll also want to consider cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin, when diversifying your investment portfolio. You don't know why to consider Bitcoin as a valid investment? Well, check out my complete beginner guide. You learn all the fundamentals and understand why it can be a life changer. Hint: Bitcoin is deflationary by design. What are your experiences with investing? Where did you make money on in the past? Let me know your best choices in the comments below. I'm excited to know. So, what's the best way to get started? In my opinion, a good approach to investing is to assign a fixed percentage of your monthly salary that goes into investing. That can be anything from 5 to 25%, depending on how high your salary and cost of living are. One thing is important here. Also, assign a certain percentage, around 5%, to your savings. Because you don't want to touch your investments when unforeseen things happen and you need some extra cash. Let's keep it simple. Let's say you can invest $1,000 per month. Let's assume you generate a net return of 7% per year. After 10 years only, you will have created a wealth of more than $175,000. In 20 years' time, this will be more than $500,000, whereas solely saving $1,000 per month would have provided you with less than half of it. This is the magic of compound interest and why getting your money to work for you is so incredibly important. By investing your money in a clever way, you can not only hedge against inflation, but build up additional wealth and buying power. This can be done to such an extent that your investments generate sufficient passive income so you don't have to work your 9-to-5 job any longer. And thus can experience true freedom of time, money, and location. True wealth. To sum it up, even though it doesn't look like it, because the $100,000 in your bank account will remain the $100,000 in the long term, you are losing money, as inflation eats away a certain percentage of your buying power every year. As a result, this can lead to a loss of 50% of your wealth over the course of only a decade, when inflation is around 7%. In the same time, you could double your existing wealth when generating 7% profits per year with your investments and thus counter inflation. Hence, saving keeps you poor, whereas investing can create an abundant life of freedom for you and your family.